before too long over on the social media pages. But when we're talking about the Mexican Revolution, a lot of focus is put on some major events that happened, reaches, generally south of us, but even reaches further south. But there are even more specific things that happen in this area. And that's something that we've been talking with you about for, a number of shows here over the past couple of years. And you have been in this area doing some research into a very specific aspect of it. But even beyond that, because people may have missed some of the previous shows, what got you interested in this subject matter in general?
Yeah, like you were saying, the Mexican Revolution played out on this side of the border in a very significant way. El Paso was the major hub where ammunition, arms,
Mm-hmm.
also people were sent over across. And of course, you had people like Pancho Villa coming over here, having his ice cream in downtown El Paso. Orozco, one time in 1911, came across the border to get a good night's sleep because the battle was tiring him, causing 1,000 people to come into the streets, and agents had to escort him back across the bridge. So what I always got interested in was the secret agents that were around here. You had a Mexican Secret Service, you had a federal agency, the Bureau of Investigations. I call it the FBI with a small f.
Right, because it was certainly federal at that time, but again, it was not even referred to by that. The three-letter acronym, TLAs, if you're really into that kind of thing, weren't as much of a thing at that point. This, among other things, was not even just a new agency, but a relatively new concept in, law enforcement, essentially.
Yeah, highly political, too. This is one thing that I found out in this research. So I've been working together with a scholar who is a retired professor. He lives in Las Cruces, and so that's why I spent the last 3 months working with him. What an incredible experience. Like Schwarzenegger says, I'll be back. Yeah. So the question here is really, what value did the federal agents have? What role did they play? And when you read histories about the FBI, and most of our listeners probably would agree with me, you think the FBI started in 1924 when J. Edgar Hoover became the director. He calls himself the first director, which is theoretically true because the position of director was called chief before him.
Okay.
So he was actually not the first, he was the fifth, right? And so people need to understand is this FBI history really starting with J. Edgar Hoover, which is kind of what he liked to be known as, the guy that built this thing, or what happened before? And here we have Mexican Revolution, then we have World War I, and we talked in a previous show about the influence World War I had. So not only did you suddenly have federal agents battling Mexican Secret Service and Mexican factions recruiting here and so forth. Suddenly you also had German secret agents like Felix Sommerfeld and others also roaming the streets here. So the theory was, let's take a closer look at the FBI before Hoover and just see what we find. And the findings are amazing.
So let's talk a little bit about what the way things were, particularly in this area, but also a little bit more nationally before really the advent of, essentially the Mexican Revolution itself, which gets a little bit hard to pin down because there were many, currents and portents and political movements happening within that country itself here. But it's really when you get to, the references, Porfiriato and some of these other names, Madeira, Carranza, and of course Pancho Villa, that things really start getting very complicated within that realm here. But of course, the influence in this area and all the stuff moving through it was pretty significant. But the way law enforcement was dealing with that time, again, the FBI, or BI as it was known at the time, existed, but was pretty, anemic might be a decent way to put it.
Definitely underfunded, undermanned, understaffed. So what you're saying, first of all, that, it's kind of confusing, all these different factions, that here is Porfirio Diaz, and then Madero, and then Orozco, and then there's a Reyes revolt, and there's a Magonista revolt, and on and on. You're not the only one that's confused. I'm confused too, and so were the agents. And there's some hilarious reports where they report back to Washington, D.C. and ask, which faction does this guy belong to? Do we have any paperwork on that? And the bad luck was that sometimes the same guy wherever the wind blew from, joined 3 different factions. So yesterday it was a Felicista, tomorrow it's actually an Orosquista, and the day after tomorrow he might join Huerta. Who knows?
So tumultuous would be an understatement
Yeah.
here for this whole time, and yet even just plotting it out on paper from the modern day kind of full 2020 hindsight perspective is an endeavor on its own. So very much more for the guys literally trying to figure out in the moment here, more than a little frustrating, I have to assume here. But even then, just the apparatus around here. I mean, we're very much in the modern era, familiar with the idea that, I mean, hey, we have in this area now, we have every 3-letter agency you've heard of, and probably more than a few you haven't. But at that point in time, I mean, there was essentially nothing in terms of infrastructure. I mean, the way that it largely worked was that they would have to come in and work with whatever was present there, largely from local law enforcement, right?
Exactly. So this is really the important part. Is our Constitution specified, or not the Constitution. We actually, I think the Justice Department was founded later, but there is there's nothing in the Constitution that says the federal government can enforce law. That's usually a state thing,
right?
And so if you think about the Justice Department having to enforce national laws, for example, the White Slavery Act, the Mann Act, that's one of those laws that the early BI was very much concerned about, people taking women across state lines. Or you had land grabbing. You had federal lands, and people would just take it and sell it and fake titles. And so these are federal law enforcement issues. And for that, there was no agency. And the way this worked before the FBI with a small f, was that the Justice Department would borrow Secret Service agents. So the Secret Service existed since the Civil War. And so the Justice Department would borrow agents to do investigations for them. And so that worked out pretty well until Theodore Roosevelt got in a huff with Congress, because the agents that were detailed to the Justice Department to look at land grabbing uncovered that members of Congress were actually involved in some illegal land grabbing issues. And what is the result? The result is that Congress passed a law that says, from now on, the Justice Department cannot use Secret Service agents. And that didn't go over well with Roosevelt, who decided, okay, fine, if I can't do that, then I'm going to start a new agency. And this was 1908. His Attorney General started this Bureau of Investigation. It started with 34 agents, and the funny part is 10 of them, the first 10, were the same Secret Service agents that they had been using before. He just hired them into the Bureau of Investigation. So those were the original agents. So you think 34 agents, 1908, it went up to like 100 by 1910 when the Mexican Revolution started, covering the entire country.
Right.
So if you look at El Paso, the federal presence in El Paso were 2 guys. There was one guy in Los Angeles, there was one guy in Tucson, there was one guy in Marfa, Texas, maybe 1 or 2 in Brownsville, maybe 1 or 2 in San Antonio. That's it. That's how they guarded the entire Mexican border.
And again, if the subtext of all the programs that we've had you on to discuss about is that there were a lot, again, the complicated situations aside, a lot of logistics, a lot of movements, because again, right through this area were some of the primary, supply routes. So we had a lot of interest, a lot of agents, and a lot of colorful characters that people probably have heard of, and a lot that they may not have, that were operating in this region. So the intelligence need was there, but the apparatus kind of, again, was barely getting going. I mean, it's hard to even call it an apparatus at that point, because it was a bunch of individual dudes just doing stuff.
Right. Well, and you had district courts, so they would bring their cases to the district judge, and there was also U.S. commissioner. So you could have these 2 routes, legal routes, to bring somebody to trial. But here again, the locals didn't like the feds getting into their stuff. So if you look at court records, what you find is that of 10 cases that the El Paso agent would bring, 9 would be thrown out with acquittals or postponed, and then the witnesses suddenly disappear, or literary judgments against their interests. So very difficult environment to actually enforce a national law. And the neutrality laws, this is really what was concerning in the Mexican Revolution. They forbid Americans to basically supply arms, ammunition, or people, or engage in war against a country the United States is at peace with. And in this case, of course, Mexico, we are at peace with. And so if you recruited people for an armed rebellion, then you would violate the neutrality laws.
Which ended up, as we discussed previously, being a bit of a porous concept, I guess you could say here, because it wasn't nearly that absolute. And again, given the whims and winds of this conflict south of the border here, could end up being, well, changing from week to week, and well, often did. And so that was part of the issue that they were then running into as they were looking at this more, well, essentially pre-modern idea of how federal law enforcement and national security concerns could be handled, but they were running into issues here. So we're already coming up on the need for the first break here. So coming out of this break, we'll talk more about some of these specific situations, the things that were being done here. I mean, they probably wouldn't have liked to have been called arms trafficking, but that's essentially what was happening: arms, material, supplies, and who it was going to, and the manner in which, plus also, other things along the actual way, human intelligence was being gathered, which we've talked about previously. So it all links up together with this concept from a lot of previous shows, which again, people can go over and see on our various social media outlets, both the Facebook page, facebook.com/El Paso History Radio Show, as well as the YouTube page. And we are up there over on Remember in El Paso when there. Rick Nahara checking in from over there. We do appreciate it. A bunch of other people checking in with us. Dale Hansen from Schertz, Texas. Maria Barragan from West Valley City, Utah. Angie Salazar up there in Pueblo, Colorado. Savio Garcia, Monica Cervantes up in Las Cruces as well. And Flaco Jimenez giving us a good morning here. Good morning to you all as well. We got a lot more we're going to be talking about here. Again, a lot of interesting characters, a lot of interesting situations, and some good documentation that Harry here has been able to uncover here. So again, guest in studio here is Heribet von Feilitzsh, independent historian, author, and scholar on these issues. But we're going to come right back after this break with more of the El Paso History Radio Show here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
El Paso History TV is now available for free on YouTube.com. Take a look at recent ABC 7 news reports by Bernie Sargent on El Paso History TV about Waco tanks, the Franklin Mountains, Concordia Cemetery, and more. The YouTube channel also has more than 100 videos about El Paso history with lectures, documentaries, and various history clips. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV and find out how Texas history begins in El Paso. Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant and Cantina serves the old Griggs Mexican food recipes in a new location at 6761 Doniphan Drive. Enjoy great New Mexican food with cold beer and the one and only margarita from the cantina. The managers and cooks from the original Griggs restaurant serve tacos, combination plates, and sopapillas. Get the best Mexican food in the valley at Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant and Cantina, 6761 Doniphan, near Loop 375. Call 877-2152.
News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
And now, let's turn back the pages of time and return to the El Paso History Radio Show. Brought to you by Patrick Tuttle, Coldwell Banker Heritage Real Estate, 915-588-1850. Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant, 6761 Doniphan Drive. By M1 EP Management Corporation, 915-592-4549. By Mission Del Rey Southwest, 1421 Lee Trevino, with El Paso souvenirs, decor, and gift shopping. Here again, El Paso History with Andrew J. Polk.
Welcome back here to the El Paso History Radio Show, which we are up on Facebook, of course, facebook.com/El Paso History Radio Show. You can go there for our weekly promo announcements, what we got coming up for you in future weeks, and also, of course, what we got over for you on the YouTube channel, El Paso History TV. Again, that's youtube.com/El Paso History TV. The El Paso Gold DVD series from Capstone Productions, produced over the last couple of decades, now available online completely and free, again, at that El Paso History TV on YouTube. And that also includes the 20 segments recently produced for ABC 7 that are also available there. And also remember to support our advertisers. They're very important and near and dear to our hearts here as we continue to talk about El Paso history. And the way you can find them is by going over to El Paso, again, by going to Pepe's restaurant in Cañetillo. They're going to be open for dining in-house today, 6761 Donovan Drive. They were, of course, out for the holiday last week, but we'll be headed out there as we are again joined here in studio by independent scholar, historian, and author Heribet von Feilitzsh. You'll be heading out with us there today, right?
Big margarita is all I can say.
Of course, it is the home of the one and only margarita. So looking forward to seeing you all out there if you want to join us out there here. So again, talking with Harry further about some of these interesting topics related to the Mexican Revolution and really essentially the persecution of it in this country, or the prosecution of the conflict, and then the currents that were moving right through this area, but also then more focus on the law enforcement problems, because again, you were mentioning in the first segment there some of those neutrality laws that you're not supposed to be doing things to a country we're not at war with in terms of actual armed support, those kind of things, including supplying arms. But that was, again, a porous concept at best throughout all of this, because the political concerns came into it. And that's really where, again, even the early established Bureau of Investigation, a federal agency, but not the FBI as we know it today, we're really running into, the few people that were involved in it in the region were having difficulties, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, so you have two aspects. So first, there are locals who are doing business, and they sure as hell didn't want any feds telling them you can't sell arms to the Mexicans, So that was one of the issues. But the other thing, and this is something that Charles Harris, who I'm working with, and I found actually astonishingly, is if you think about law enforcement, it's kind of a black and white issue.
Okay.
Right? I mean, you have a law and, so neutrality laws are not very well written, but it's pretty clear, if you start recruiting people and you're sending armed people into Mexico, then you should face arrest and prosecution. What we didn't realize in the beginning, but now becomes absolutely clear, is that the BI is a political institution. It's an arm of the executive, and is at the whim of foreign policy. And what you see throughout the Mexican Revolution is, as foreign policy changes, so changes the enforcement of the neutrality laws. So, you take, for example, one of the earliest troubles is the Magonista revolt, right? So there's Ricardo and Enrique Flores Magon, two anarchists and labor leaders in Mexico, run afoul with the Mexican government, come to the United States, and end up in Los Angeles. And so the Diaz regime in Mexico immediately told the Justice Department, go after them. They're anarchists, and we don't want them to enter Mexico and start a revolt. And so federal agents actually went after them, but also worked closely with Mexican agents. So Diaz sent his own guys. And as you said, the BI at the time had very little manpower. So there's this guy, Joe Priest, actually, who follows them all over the place. He's paid by the Diaz regime, does a good job from the law enforcement perspective. The Magonistas are, decimated. And in fact, Ricardo ends up dying of medical neglect in a U.S. federal penitentiary. So they really did a number on these guys. But interestingly is Joe Priest was then selected by the Justice Department to be the agent in charge of the San Antonio office.
Okay, so some of those movements around here, and again, we had their picture up on screen there of Ricardo and Enrique here. We'll pop it up again there. So, I mean, these kind of characters were coming through here, and we've even got some pictures from the point in time where there was actually, a lot of inspections going on. I mean, the El Paso bridge was a different kind of experience at that point in time. Here's the bridge into Juarez from El Paso, but there were also, inspections for arms going on even just kind of individuals here in kind of, again, support of that law and support of that concept here. So we've talked previously on previous programs about some like the customs inspectors and the role they played here, but the fact that some of these individuals had to play a role like that was kind of a testament to the fact of, and the lack of preparation, infrastructure, that kind of stuff of these agents here. So as this conflict continued to evolve and continued to, change and shift, I mean, there were some, again, if you're not just looking at enforcing the laws here, you're looking about what are your actual goals with foreign policy. Again, that's kind of important to know, both as well official policy, but then also for these individuals involved in the early BI, knowing what exactly the wins are and what they should or shouldn't be enforcing here. And again, you got to remember at that point in time, none of this, field offices, major areas, they were often, and not even this, the concept has been often satirized in media of, I'm in charge here now, I'm the agent in charge. They kind of had to go, not exactly hat in hand, but very kind of like, hey, local law enforcement, could really use your help here. Can we work something out kind of thing? And even then, it wasn't necessarily the most cordial relationship, as you're mentioning a lot of these cases being thrown out.
Yeah. So you had resistance by locals that the feds are suddenly messing with their business.
Mhm.
Let's just take it from the Magonistas to the next step, which was the Madeira Revolution. So we still have Diaz in charge. We still have the same neutrality laws. In fact, Diaz complained like hell to the U.S. government. What's happening here in San Antonio? There's Francisco Madero and all his guys. They're bringing money. They're buying weapons. They're recruiting people. A clear case of, this is a neutrality law violation. What comes out of Washington is not go after Madero, kind of like they did with the Magonistas. They go like, well, why don't you slow walk this? Why don't you watch, do your research, keep investigating, very good idea, but don't do much, because why? Diaz was 80 years old. The U.S. government kind of liked Madero. He was somebody they thought they could work with. And so, perfect example, the Magonistas, anarchists aligning with the IWW, that's seen as a national threat. So they get taken out in a heartbeat. Here comes Madero. He can do his thing. And in fact, if you look at what happened then in 1911 with the Battle of Ciudad Juarez, when Diaz is finally defeated and leaves the country, they did this with an American battalion, right? There was a mercenary battalion that was all foreigners. They did it with American arms and American ammunition. And they had their headquarters on this side of the border. So there you can see how the BI agents had to be very careful. You can't just arrest Madero. There was actually a warrant out for him. In fact, that's one of the reasons he started the revolution when he did, because he was afraid he would get arrested. But in the end, nothing happened. And of course, then he becomes the president of Mexico. All the cases that had to do with the Maderistas are then dropped.
So again, he was a little bit concerned about, maybe things are getting a little bit hot in this region, so I got to deal with it and maybe go start my revolution, which is an interesting concept to talk from the modern sense here. But again, that was the kind of currents going throughout all of this here. So we're coming up on the need for the next break here. So coming out of this break, we'll talk further about this and about, again, how some of these individual decisions and affecting, some of these colorful characters that you may have heard of, but others that were kind of behind the scenes involved in this and in the, prosecution of this conflict and all the policies involved with it. So again, we are talking with historian, scholar, and author Heribet von Feilitzsh, and going to continue talking about this here. More people tuning in with us. Rose Rodriguez wishing us a good morning to you as well. You can chime in over on our social media as well, and we will take a phone call or two here. Just if you're calling in, might have to wait till the break till we can get with you on the line here. So expect to be on hold for a minute here, but otherwise we're going to be back after this break with more on the El Paso History Radio Show here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
Many retired El Paso area homeowners don't know where to begin when it comes to downsizing and selling their home. Patrick Tuttle and his Legacy Home team follow a proven process to help retired homeowners sell faster and for more money. Call Patrick Tuttle at 915-588-1850 today and get your home sold faster and for more money. That's Patrick Tuttle at 915-588-1850. Call him today.
M1 EP Management Corporation is proud to sponsor the El Paso History Show. If you're tired of the ups and downs of the stock market, invest in real estate. M1 EP manages apartments in El Paso and helps investors buy, hold, and sell property. See the website, m1ep.com. M1ep.com. To learn more about the many benefits and long-term appreciation of investing in real estate, call 915-592-4549. 915-592-4549.
Talk El Paso weekdays at 4 on News Radio 690 KTSM, breaking down the impact of the news on the borderland and beyond. Brought to you in part by Mission Del Rey Southwest, Souvenirs, Gifts, and Decor. That's Talk El Paso, Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m., right here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
Research shows that people remember radio ads with a booming voice that emphasizes all the main points. So to help you remember that Liberty Mutual Insurance Company customizes your home insurance so you only pay for what you need.
That part is super important.
Here's one with a booming voice.
I'm emphasizing everything.
Liberty Mutual customizes your home insurance.
Like a page with every word highlighted.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
There's an app for everything. And I bet you have multiple apps on your phone just to order food, get a ride, or even find a date. But we made the iHeartRadio app your all-in-one app. Your favorite music, radio stations, and podcasts together, and all for free. Listen to your favorite radio station anywhere you want, plus all your favorite music and just about every podcast in the world, all in one place with one touch. Download the free iHeartRadio app today.
iHeartRadio.
Discover music, radio, and podcasts you'll love.
El Paso's News Radio, 690 KTSM.
And now, let's turn back the pages of time and return to the El Paso History Radio Show. Brought to you by Patrick Tuttle, Coldwell Banker Heritage Real Estate, 915-588-1850. Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant, 6761 Donovan Drive. By M1 EP Management Corporation, 915-592-4549. By Mission Del Rey Southwest, 1421 Lee Trevino, with El Paso souvenirs, decor, and gift shopping. Here again, El Paso History with Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you for joining us here for the El Paso History Radio Show, airing live here on News Radio 690 KTSM. I want to mention some of our partners in talking about and promoting, well, local history in its own way, but also local events and such. Celebration of Our Mountains is a good place to find out a lot about the natural history and even just, well, good events to go out if you like getting out and about here. You can find them at celebrationofourmountains.org. That's celebrationofourmountains.org to find their full schedule of events. Some of the ones they got coming up here. A little bit later in the month, they have more going on their Useful Plant series. That's going to be out at Artavino's Desert Crossing towards the end of actually next month. I should correct myself, in May. But then coming up at the start of the month here, they've got some Dog Canyon and Geology of Tularosa Basin hikes, and a little bit towards the middle of the month, again, Artavino's Crossing Dino hike with Eric Campus leading that. So if you know about him and his history and that particular subject matter with the dinos, him having discovered the dino tracks, it'd probably be a good one there. So again, for all of the information on them, celebrationofourmountains.org. And of course, don't forget that our friends over at Monterey Asset Management have changed their name to be M1 EP Management Corporation. Their new website, again, m1ep.com, M1 EP.com, or give them a call at 915-592-4549 for dealing with, well, property investment. And if you're sick of the stock market and want to look more at investing in properties, they can certainly help you with that. And again, property management, m1ep.com. But of course, we are joined here in studio, as we are going to be throughout this program, here by Heribet von Feilitzsh. So thank you for sticking around with us as we're talking about some of the early currents of the, well, even just the concept of essentially both federal law enforcement, its application here in the borderland, and how the demands of the Mexican Revolution, well, led to its own further, revolutionization, because it was required, because there were a lot of issues coming in. And so we were talking a little bit earlier about even just the idea of a field office. And so where were these guys actually headquartered in the area?
The Mills building.
Oh,
So
okay.
downtown. And it's really funny because if you, like I said, they had basically only two agents.
Mhm.
So they had a bunch of informants, and they would bring them. There would be people that were part of the Madeira group. There would be people that were opposed to Madeira, and they would use them for information. And while the prosecutor across the hall is basically working with people that are accused of crimes,
Mhm.
these informants walked right by them. So can you imagine?
Mhm.
There was no secret in town. You knew when the BI got somebody to inform them, that would go. You might as well print it in the paper. It was that public, and so.
Mhm.
Again, makes it very difficult to start anything that's, what we think of intelligence, clandestine, because everybody knew everyone. And like I said, the office was right across the hall from the prosecutor.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tight quarters, shall we say. But again, we're talking about kind of the genesis of this whole thing. And it was those kind of situations that then increasingly led to maybe we shouldn't be doing things this way, or maybe we need more resources as part of it here we'll get into a little bit further. But again, just the changes and the wins of, victories essentially could change the way that they were then these agents having to deal with these cases here. So we had talked a little bit about Madeira, who we had the great picture of up on, I think you were saying either huge horse or small person there when it was going into again, that one listed before the Casas Grandes, I want to say that one is. But of course, that was just one of the currents here. And there were more individuals, not even just part of the conflict, but even coming directly through this region that were at issue.
Yeah. So the biggest arms dealer in the whole region, there were actually two, is Shelton Payne and Krakow Sorkin Moye, both of them located right here in El Paso. And so, Shelton Payne, for example, supplied Madeira, and Krakow, in many cases, supplied enemies of Madeira. By the way, when you looked at that huge horse, do you know how big Madeira was?
I do not. So put that in perspective for us.
5'2". So every horse looks huge when he stands next to it or sits on it.
Fair enough.
But anyway, but he was a this Casas Grandes battle. He showed a lot of courage. In fact, his bodyguard later said that either he doesn't know that bullets kill or he's really courageous. So anyway, yeah. So Madeira wins, the initial battle basically against the Diaz regime. Diaz is exiled to Europe, and there's a democratic election, and Madeira wins by a landslide in November 1911, the first democratically elected government of Mexico. And so what's interesting, again, here looking at the border, one of the people that were a candidate against Madeira and were harassed by the Madeiristas in Mexico, but he really didn't have a chance, was General Bernardo Reyes. And Reyes was, a very well-known guy, very popular, also popular on this side of the border. So when he came over into exile and declaring himself in revolt against Madeira, thousands of people came to San Antonio to see the general coming in. And so again, now we have a constituted government in Mexico. This time it's Francisco Madero. And here comes this guy who is obviously recruiting, declares himself in revolt, has a plan on how to defeat the Mexican government, et cetera, et cetera. They're recruiting, they're buying arms, they're buying munitions. So the BI is called upon to investigate potential neutrality law violations. It's, again, should be a clear-cut thing. They had a few problems. The San Antonio office also only had 2 people, and they didn't have a car. And if you know anything about human intelligence, it's hard to shadow somebody if the somebody you're shadowing has a car and you can only take the trolley if you want to go somewhere. But anyway, so it was hard following Reyes. In fact, they lost him in the end. He literally just got in his car and drove away, and the agent couldn't follow him because he didn't have a car. So here comes this investigation. It's very clear, neutrality law violation. The BI goes after this pretty handily. In fact, the Madero sent Sommerfeld from Mexico City to assist. So Sommerfeld in November 1911 arrives in San Antonio, immediately goes to the BI agent in charge. His name is H.A. Thompson. And by the way, anybody in the audience knows anything about H.A. Thompson. He's such an enigma. We cannot find out anything about this guy. All I know is he was older, so he was in his 50s already, and basically joins the Mexican Secret Service 2 years after the Mexican Revolution started. So interesting guy. No records on him so far, but we're working on him.
More research to be done always, of course, here.
But anyway, so here's H.A. Thompson really going after it. Sommerfeld providing the Mexican Secret Service resources. He had a car, by the way, so there are actually reports where they're driving together. Now comes another problem. Reyes, in his conspiracy, are 2 guys. One is a sheriff, Sanchez Amador, and the other one is a guy named F.A. Chapa. And both of those are strong supporters of the Texas Governor Colquitt. And this is 1911, winter 1911. Colquitt is thinking about his next election, and and F.A. Chapa is the guy who's going to deliver the Hispanic vote of San Antonio. So now
Complicated. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Now think about, now you're a BA agent, and word comes from the governor. Why don't you slow walk this thing? You do of course, would never want to influence your investigation, but let's just, keep it, make sure you cross your T's and dot the I's, because Reyes is a good friend of the governor.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean? And
Mhm.
so, they finally did they did indict him. And like I said, he got away. He got in his car and drove off and got away, crossed the border into Mexico, got arrested, and ended up in a penitentiary in Mexico City. But really, from an effectiveness standpoint, the BI had no chance here.
Mhm.
So not only are we now talking about foreign policy in Washington changing, but now you have these local conditions.
Right.
And of course, all the people they arrested got acquitted, or usually what the courts would do if they didn't want to punish somebody, they would just the defense attorney would just ask for a stay, which means the next session of the grand jury, which would be 9 months away, is then when it gets put back on the table. Well, by then, all the witnesses that the BBI had gathered are either in Mexico or got killed or don't want to come to court anymore.
Scattered to the wind.
Yeah. And so this is what happens with these court cases. I mean, we went through case after case after case, and it's just, if I would be a BI agent at that time, I would consider suicide. I mean, all this work for nothing. They bring these cases, and then, here's a judge, Walla T. Burns, who sides with the Mexican accused because he didn't like the feds. And so he acquits all these people, even though they're airtight cases. And so again, you can see the beginnings were difficult, and this is why I'm so interested in the people.
Right.
Somebody like Thompson, or we have another guy, Fred Lancaster. He becomes the chief of police of San Antonio in 1912 or so, but he's one of the people right in the beginning there. They had to work with nothing, and they had to somehow make it work. And you were talking earlier about, Felix Sommerfeld's involvement.
Right.
Now, this guy had 200 agents on the ground here. And so since the Madero government wanted the BI to be successful in curbing, revolts and neutrality law violations against their government, Sommerfeld made these agents available to the BI. So in 1912, for example, when the Orozco Rebellion starts, what you see is a tremendous confluence of interest where the Mexican Secret Service literally drives the BI agent to the scene of the crime, since they still didn't have a car, and they make arrests together. You showed earlier this bridge, right? The international bridge. So Sommerfeld has the Mexican Secret Service place guards, Mexicans, on the El Paso side of the bridge to search people's clothes and cars for weapons and munitions. So you have literally a law enforcement activity happening in the United States by a foreign intelligence service.
Yeah, and we got that picture also pop there of Sommerfeld, and just showing his influence there. I believe that he's in the middle there, if I'm correct.
He's all the way to the left.
All the way to the left there. And, well, of course, right next to him would be in a not totally recognizable outfit, but when the mustache is recognizable, there being Pancho Villa.
Well, so, he's now in this picture, I think it's taken around 1914. Pancho Villa is a brigadier general, and you can see from his uniforms he gets fancier and fancier. For at least for the photographs, he actually walked around in mufti most of the time.
Yeah, again, that picture that I love from the elite confectionery is just again fancy in its own way in its own time here. But again, so essentially, the federal law enforcement was finding themselves outmatched and not literally outgunned, even though at that point in time they couldn't actually have guns for the largest part.
Yeah, so this is an interesting issue. So by originally, when the BI was founded in 1908, the agents had absolutely no right to arrest anybody or carry guns. That changed like in 1910, I think it starts where they're allowed to carry at least a sidearm. And But when it came to arrests, they had until 1911-12, they had to literally bring a U.S. Marshal, deputy U.S. Marshal with them.
Wow.
Or they had to get the local sheriff to help. But they were not allowed to arrest anybody. Yeah.
Wow.
That's a state issue.
So a lot of immediate needs need to be addressed here. And again, as they kept encountering the issues and requirements of managing from the U.S. side, this conflict brewing and continuously evolving south of the border here got, well, out of hand in a lot of ways here. So, I mean, we're getting close to need for another break here, but I mean, it's pretty clear that, yeah, there were a lot of deficiencies being identified almost immediately about how this work was needing to be done. So what were some of the thoughts at the top that you're finding about how these were being considered? Like, I mean, were they happy with the performance of this happening so far? Were there similar kind of frustrations and solutions even being discussed to, you know, that kind of time frames we're talking about, you know, early 1910s, middle of that kind of era?
Yeah. So you have to go back to the people, you know, who are they actually hiring? And you know, the BI is, because the Mexican Revolution is an emergency. I mean, there's American property being destroyed, you know, there's a border being violated. And so it is a big deal. And so the BI hires rapidly. And so one of the things I was trying to find out is, so who did they hire? Well, they hired lawmen. They hired, for example, people that were previously in the Texas Rangers. They would hire former sheriffs or police chiefs. You know, if you look at the FBI later, or even the BI in the 20s, you know, a lot of the agents are actually lawyers and accountants and, you know, people coming out of totally different ways. Here in the beginning, these guys are mostly lawmen. And another thing that I found, which is fascinating, obviously the recruiting process was still in its early stages, because if you had political credibility, so if you had some creds, Wilson was elected president in 1912. So if you were a Democrat and you know, like there's an agent Cole in Ohio, he's involved with a party there. He becomes an agent here without any previous experience in law enforcement or intelligence, simply because he fit the party ticket, you know. So you have that too. Yeah. So you have under Taft, you have a lot of Republican candidates that become agents, and then Wilson changes that to Democrat, obviously. But yeah, so these initial guys are working with literally nothing. There's one example. There's an informant that was the guy in charge of the King Ranch. I mean, we're talking huge. Right?
Yeah. That's
and,
like, I want to say that one's the larger or on commensurate size with like the state of Rhode Island.
Yeah. So this is the farm manager. So he's obviously, you know, got a good salary and everything like that. He's coming to the BI as an informant. So he has some information, I think, about the Big Bend area or whatever. There is a discussion. There's telegrams going back and forth whether they can afford paying the informant for his trolley ticket. I'm not kidding you. I mean, they literally, we're talking 30 cents here. They had to get permission from Washington to pay this, you know. So they're working with literally nothing. And so this makes this story even that much more compelling, because if you look at the BI in 1916, 1917, it's the premier counterintelligence agency in the United States. And this is happening in 5 years. Wow. And the guy in charge, we'll talk about him in the second hour, A. Bruce Bilaski, single-handedly created this incredible organization.
So we're going to have to take that next break right now and get into that. But coming out of this, we'll talk more about, again, these situations and the currents that were going on that then led to some of these individuals being involved in here. So stay tuned. We'll be back with more on the El Paso History Radio Show here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
El Paso History TV is now available for free on YouTube.com. Take a look at recent ABC 7 news reports by Bernie Sargent on El Paso History TV about Waco tanks, the Franklin Mountains, Concordia Cemetery, and more. The YouTube channel also has more than 100 videos about El Paso history with lectures, documentaries, and various history clips. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV and find out how Texas history begins in El Paso.
The Tipping Point with Mike Tipton is coming back home to Fox Sports 1380, an iHeartMedia radio station, and the iHeartRadio app every Friday from 5 to 6 p.m. starting January 7th. Do you love sports, food, El Paso culture? Then this is the show for you. I'm Mike Tipton, and I'm inviting you to tune in to The Tipping Point with Mike Tipton on Fox Sports 1380, covering local, statewide, and national sports stories, news, and information that you want to talk about. The Tipping Point with Mike Tipton, Friday afternoons at 5 p.m. on Fox Sports 1380 and the iHeartRadio app.
If you're a valued customer, you deserve a simple gesture of appreciation from your credit card company. And that's why Discover matches all of the cash back you've earned at the end of your first year. Discover. Exceptionally common sense. Learn more at discover.com/match. Limitations apply.
What would you give for a child you loved? To make their wish come true? To help them fight a critical illness? Just imagine what you'd do. You see, wishes are so powerful, and you can make them real. They can give a child back their childhood, even change the way they feel. Every single one of us can make the stars align. Because when we come together, hope and joy will shine. Wishes need stars like you. Visit makeawish@wish.org.
News Radio 690 KTSM.
And now, let's turn back the pages of time and return to the El Paso History Radio Show. Brought to you by Patrick Tuttle, Coldwell Banker Heritage Real Estate, 915-588-1850. Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant, 6761 Donovan Drive. By M1 EP Management Corporation, 915-592-4549. By Mission Del Rey Southwest, 1421 Lee Trevino, with El Paso souvenirs, decor, and gift shopping. Here again, El Paso History with Andrew J. Polk.
Of course, if you want to find out more about some of our great partners who help us in promotion of, well, local history, but also other local events here, Rick Kern's music podcast, Talk and Rock Radio. You can go to talkandrockradio.com to see what he's putting on some more of the cultural aspects, I guess you could say. He does an interesting program, and of course, having hosted the Border Legends tour for years, and still very intimate with the people involved in that. Go and find him over there. But also, of course, remember to call 588-1850. That's 915-588-1850 for Patrick Tuttle, Coldwell Banker, Heritage Real Estate. Of course, Patrick is an excellent realtor, has done some great work with my family, but also you can find him for El Paso homes for sale or for rent. Again, his number rings right on him, 588-1850, 915-588-1850. Of course, we are still joined here by Heribet von Feilitzsh, Harry to his friend, independent scholar, historian, and author on a lot of these subjects here. You kind of started off in this whole subject matter by looking at some of these secret agents here. And of course, that was almost a similar standpoint that some of these early, again, Bureau of Investigation, which was federal, but not really called the FBI as we know it today. They were having to do essentially in the same moment, these same kind of dealing with these issues without the benefit of the hindsight that you've looked at here. And this led to a lot of frustration. And so we've kind of gotten up to the Madero era when there was some stability. It's hard to call anything particularly stable during this era of Mexican history, but also, of course, the Mexican Revolution occurrence moving through this area. But I mean, there was a further revolution needed here. So we're going to be getting more into some of the interesting characters that came out of this, but just kind of set the stage for us here. What were the, considerations going on at this point during the conflict?
Yeah, so after Madero gets overthrown, by the way, one of the conspirators is Reyes, who gets freed from the penitentiary. He has the honor of having died as the first person in this uprising in the Decena Trágica in Mexico City. And that rings in a whole nother era in the Mexican Revolution. Now you have Huerta, the usurper president, and you have Carranza and the constitutionalists on the other side fighting Huerta. And again, neutrality law enforcement here becomes incredibly difficult because the U.S. government does not recognize Huerta. So that means you can send weapons to the Mexican government or to the opposition legally, right? And so what comes down from Washington to the BI agents here is, well, we kind of like Carranza. So find out what Huerta's people are doing and stop everything they're doing. But, do a little bit more research and slow walk the Carrancista side. Again, an impossible situation. And like you mentioned, it's difficult for agents. H.A. Thompson, the guy I mentioned before, in charge of the field office in San Antonio, actually joins the Mexican Secret Service. I guess they paid better. And you have Fred Lancaster jumping at the chief of police job that opens up and leaves the BI. So you have some of those early guys leaving. There's another guy, Curly Hebert, great agent. He thinks that that Thompson and there's another guy, Ellie Ross here in El Paso, they were corrupt. And so Hebert is complaining like hell about them, but he dies of typhoid or something like that. So yeah, so it's an agency in turmoil.
Agency in turmoil, and they really had to ramp up as, again, the turmoil continued south of the border, but the currents, again, coming right through this area of a whole lot of agents and interest. So we'll have to get more into that here in the second hour of the show here. So again, Harry sticking around with us. We'll be back with more on the El Paso History Radio Show after this top of the hour news break here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
Thank you for listening to the El Paso History Radio Show. There's another hour to go, so please stay tuned. This hour is brought to you by Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant, home of the Juan and only Margarita, by Patrick Tuttle, Coldwell Banker Heritage Real Estate, 915-588-1850, by M1 EP Management Corporation, 915-592-4549, by Mission Del Rey Southwest, 1421 Lee Trevino, with El Paso souvenirs, decor, and gift shopping. We'll be right back after the news, right here on News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
Talk El Paso, weekdays at 4 on News Radio 690 KTSM, breaking down the impact of the news on the borderland and beyond. Brought to you in part by Mission Del Rey Southwest, souvenirs, gifts, and decor. That's Talk El Paso, Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m., right here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
Spring fever means excitement, and at Casa Buick GMC, it's an exciting time for you to trade up for a great vehicle.
It's Casa Buick GMC's Spring Fever pre-owned sales event
this weekend.
Come take your pick from El Paso's giant selection of used cars, trucks, and SUVs.
We heat it up with the best financing options and lowest rates available.
2017 Kia Soul, $16,725. 2016 GMC Sierra SLT, $37,777. 2020 Buick Envision Preferred, $29,776.
It's an exciting time for you to trade up for a great vehicle this Friday and Saturday at Casa Buick GMC, next to the airport, Montana and Airway.
We all hear the radio ads about the IRS. They tell you to be afraid, to be scared, and they try to frighten you into calling. But I'm not here to do that. Tax Relief Advocates is different. TRA is here to tell you that if you owe money to the IRS, whether it's $5,000, $50,000, or $500,000, we have a solution. It doesn't matter if you're sitting in your car at work or with your kids. No matter where you are, call now. 800-505-6516. Don't lose hope. TRA can eliminate or reduce what you owe to the IRS, and there is zero risk to you. If we can't reduce your tax debt, then you pay nothing. Our passion is taxes and helping individuals fix their IRS problems. We have a 5-star rating on Google and Yelp, and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Tax Relief Advocates, real solutions for real people. You don't need to be afraid of the IRS any longer. End your tax nightmare today and call 800-505-6516. Again, that's 800-505-6516. Or you can visit us online at TRA.com.
Why should you volunteer with Meals on Wheels?
I never thought that 5 minutes could make so much difference in the lives of 2 people, but it has.
Drop off a warm meal and get more than you expect. Volunteer at americaletsdolunch.org. Brought to you by Meals on Wheels America and the Ad Council.
NBC News Radio, I'm Julie Ryan. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warns Russia's invasion won't stop at his country's borders. In a video address on social media, Zelensky said Russian forces were preparing to move into a breakaway region of Moldova, which borders Ukraine and Poland. The comments come after a Russian general confirmed that after first capturing the Donbas region, its forces would move to establish a land bridge to the Crimean Peninsula. A sniper-style shooting in Washington, D.C. leaves 4 people injured, and a suspect from Virginia is dead. Jim Forbes has the latest.
Shots were fired Friday afternoon around 3:30 from an apartment in Northwest D.C. As many as 60 rounds were fired at a college preparatory school near Howard University, where 2 adults and a 12-year-old were shot and are now in stable condition. A 4th woman was grazed by one of the sniper's bullets as well. During the investigation, police identified 23-year-old 23-year-old Raymond Spencer from Fairfax as a person of interest who also recorded the shootings and posted them on social media. The suspect was later found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
Florida's governor has signed a bill stripping Disney World of its special status.
I think that partnership that developed early on with Walt Disney, I don't think Walt would appreciate what's going on in this company right now.
With the stroke of a pen by Republican Ron DeSantis, Disney World is no longer a self-governing body and is stripped of its special tax status. The move was in response to Disney's vow to help repeal the state's parental rights in education law, which critics are calling the Don't Say Gay bill. The search continues today for a missing Texas National Guard soldier along the Rio Grande. A release from the Texas Military Department says efforts were paused overnight because of strong river currents. It's reported the soldier jumped into the river in an attempt to rescue a migrant woman who was struggling to get across. You're listening to the latest on NBC News Radio.
From the KFOX 14 Severe Weather Center, this is Chief Meteorologist Sandra Diaz. Look for a cooler air mass behind this system to bring temperatures back to near normal, near 80 for Saturday.
From the host of the hit true crime podcasts Dr. Death and Bad Batch comes a brand new, unbelievable story. Sympathy Pains investigates the shocking tale of one woman, a former nurse, who spent nearly 20 years faking illnesses and tragedies until her victims confronted her on national television.
Sarah DeLashmit told people she had leukemia or muscular dystrophy, even Ebola. She knew enough to be convincing, but it was all a lie.
Listen to Sympathy Pains on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey Locomotive fans, join us on Saturday, April 23rd at Southwest University Park for our final home match in April. The Locos look to uproot Oakland FC in USL Championship action. Start your game day at Later for the official pre-match party and get here when gates open at 6:30 p.m. to snag a limited edition game day poster before they're gone. Kickoff is set for 7:30 p.m. Find your tickets at eplocomotivefc.com. Vamos El Paso!
The job market is competitive right now, so you need to be competitive to attract top talent. If you're trying to fill open positions at your business, iHeartMedia is here to help. Use radio and digital targeting to find fresh, passive candidates currently in the workforce. These candidates are listening right now, looking for new opportunities. Together, we can let the community know you're hiring. Visit iHeartAdvertising.com. That's iHeartAdvertising.com.
Your time has arrived to enroll in El Paso ISD Pre-K and Kinder. Our 3, 4, and 5-year-olds follow a STEAM curriculum that encourages creative problem solving and dual language classes that build cultural appreciation. And El Paso ISD has open enrollment, so all children in El Paso County can attend. Register your qualifying 3-year-old for half-day Pre-K now, or your 4 and 5-year-old for free full-day Pre-K or Kinder at episd.org.
The El Paso History Show with Andrew J. Polk is 10 a.m. this Saturday about the last Battle of Juarez in the Mexican Revolution when the U.S. Army attacked Pancho Villa's troops in 1919. The El Paso History Show is sponsored by Patrick Tuttle, Coldwell Banker Heritage Real Estate, Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant in Cañetillo, Mission Del Rey Southwest for gifts and decor, and by M1 EP Management Corporation, Saturday morning at 10 a.m. on News Radio 690 and streaming live on Facebook and YouTube.
If you see something, why do you say something?
I see safe for my friends.
For my community.
For everyone here. We all have something worth protecting, a why that unifies us. Report suspicious activity to local authorities. If you see something, say something.
News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
News Radio 690 KTSM presents the second hour of the El Paso History Radio Show with your host, Andrew J. Polk, streaming live at ktsmradio.com. Brought to you by Patrick Tuttle, Coldwell Banker Heritage Real Estate, 915-588-1850. By Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant, home of the Juan and only Margarita. By M1 EP Management Corporation, 915-592-4549. By Mission Del Rey Southwest, 1421 Lee Trevino, for El Paso souvenirs, decor, and gift shopping. And now El Paso History with your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Welcome back here to the El Paso History Radio Show, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I am your host, Andrew J. Polk, but we are, of course, beginning hour 2, as we usually do, with a history moment. produced by documentary filmmaker Jackson Polk. This week, we are talking about, some of the other forces present in the area previous to the situation we're talking about here with the Buffalo Soldiers and their history.
Just 1 year after the Civil War, Congress created 2 experimental cavalry regiments for service on the western frontier. African-American men, most of whom had only recently been slaves, put on blue uniforms and filled the ranks of the 9th and 10th U.S. Cavalry, plus the 24th and 25th Infantry Regiments. These men fought hard from Canada to Mexico and from the Rockies to the Mississippi to keep the peace and protect settlers. Yet the very people they strove to protect often despised them for their uniform, the color of their skin, or both. It is said that their Indian adversaries called them in Buffalo Soldiers out of respect for their courage and fighting prowess. In the field and in garrison, these soldiers proved to be amazingly effective, cheerful, and loyal, and often showed great courage. They also strung telegraph wires, built roads, dug wells, and constructed and filled wayside water tanks. The major contribution of the Buffalo Soldiers was the permanent construction of the original buildings at many western forts. The Buffalo Soldiers served faithfully from 1867 to 1943, when the U.S. Army deactivated them. Troops from these regiments served at Fort Bliss, where there is now a monument to the Buffalo Soldiers. There is also an area dedicated to Buffalo Soldiers at Concordia Cemetery in central El Paso. Until recently, whenever the winning of the West was discussed, the role of the Buffalo Soldier was largely overlooked. Today, Americans are learning how these troops helped settle the frontier and defended the United States. I'm Jackson Polk with this History Moment for the El Paso History Radio Show.
So we, of course, appreciate these segments here, but also have to mention some of our other partners in history, including the great page run by Barbara Given-Baney, also affectionately known as BGB. Remember in El Paso When. You can find them under that name there. 33,000 members here, which is no small feat on its own right. But of course, if you're going to be looking at their archives or wanting to use any of them, because there's a lot of great research and pictures available on that page, you can make sure to give them credit because, of course, they've done a lot of work on that. And of course, again, Chief Admin, Owner, and Historian Barbara Given-Baney, again, BGB. Also, admins some have checked in here with us today: Rick Duncan, Rick Nahara, Margaret D. Smith, Paul Louie, and moderator Ben Vincent. We appreciate them, and they probably to promote and talk about our local history here. And as was noted during the break here, had a promo for next week's program, but we will be talking about that. But here joining us in studio right now, as we have been, is of course an independent scholar, historian, and author Heribet von Feilitzsh, also known as Harry to his friends, talking about kind of some of the time span we just heard during that history moment, more specifically the Mexican Revolution in that tumultuous time. And so there was a lot of issues in just responding to it, because we actually had a question come up during the break from a listener here about neutrality, because people may be very familiar with the in-between World War I and World War II periods, that there were some neutrality laws, some very specific things passed to try to keep the U.S. out of conflict, but essentially, neutrality had been the official policy of the United States in some various ways, but even going back to 1790s specifically.
Exactly. Yeah. So there are several iterations of the neutrality laws, but yeah, it's from the inception of the Republic. There were these neutrality laws that were not written very well, like we talked earlier about how hard it is to enforce them and so forth. But the idea basically being that the United States will not attack its neighbors or support incursions into countries that we are at peace with. And in the 1800s, they added to those, I think, twice. And I think the listener was talking about 1913. I think there was another iteration. But we always had these neutrality laws.
Yeah, again, I mean, there had been certainly wars, but to put it in very, very modern parlance, the U.S.'s policy at that point, whether considered totality or not, was essentially don't start one, won't be none. But there was a little bit of more movement. I mean, there was the whole Roosevelt White Fleet going around the world, the idea of big stick diplomacy, which was getting a little bit more slightly bellicose than the we respect neutrality. It means a little bit more as long as you're not going to mess with us kind of thing here. So that's the kind of era we're coming into at this point during that. I mean, Roosevelt had even just recently been out of office by the time the Mexican Revolution was really kicking off here. So his influence still very much felt on some of these policies here, and as Wilson was then dealing with them in some of these major parts here. But again, we were talking about right before the break here in the top of the hour news about there being kind of, again, with the tumultuous nature of the conflict, tumultuous response with, again, federal law enforcement, which was still very much in its infancy in this country at that point in time. And, well, there had been, even of these small resources available, further setbacks. So as the conflict continued to heat up south of the border and there being more issues going along with it, there was a lot more, well, I mean, there were even some good political cartoons of the day here that we got a couple of pictures up on here about, local issues, foreign entanglements, and those kind of things coming up here. So, I mean, there was a lot of concern at that time, not even just within the administration of that government, but just within the populace about, okay, how are we actually managing these things?
Yeah, I mean, don't forget, World War I is raging in Europe
Mhm.
during this time. So it started in August 1914. And so you have these field offices here at the border. But of course, you had also the biggest field office of all was New York City.
Mhm.
So by 1910, 11, they had 6 to 8 agents there. By 1915, they had 50. A
Okay.
huge office. Maybe just to see how this BI grew. If you think about the declassified files of the BI that have to do with the Mexican Revolution are about 90,000 pages.
Wow.
The German file that they have, same time period, is 450,000 pages.
Whoa.
So if
Okay.
you think about, this is investigations, this is,
Mhm.
and then of course you have a confluence because as World War I is raging in Europe, buyers from European governments are
Mhm.
trying to buy or are buying arms and munition in the US, French, Russian, and English buyers. Of course, then you had German agents trying to stop that
Yep.
and buy up these arms. One of Sommerfeld's jobs was to buy up as many ammunitions as possible and sell them to a place where they couldn't harm Germany. Well, Mexico is a logical choice here, right? So now you have a confluence of World War I and Mexican Revolution because suddenly you have German agents right here trying to sell ammunition so that the Brits can't have them. And in the end, with the Columbus attack, you even have the attempt to create a war between Mexico and the United States, so the United States couldn't go to Europe. All this is facing this nascent federal agency, and so when we talked about the early years, how it was, they had no resources, they had no
Mhm.
manpower. By the time World War I cranks up, they are hiring like crazy, and they hire interesting people, good people, crack agents. Maybe if you want to, we can go into some of these characters
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
are absolutely amazing by today's standards. Um, why don't we start with A. Bruce Bilaski, right? So
Mhm.
he's the chief. Um, he was 29 years old when he took over the department.
Huh.
Think about that.
Yeah.
29 years old. He's a lawyer, got a law degree in 1907. Worked in the examiner's office. So the first chief of the BI, his name was Stanley Finch. Bilaski was kind of his. First, he was an agent, but then he was kind of his assistant. And again, we're talking only a handful of agents at the
Right.
time. But what Finch did is he established the way records are kept. Think about this. They had no internet. They had no computers. This was card catalogs. And in the files
Right.
that we looked at, you look at these cards and the cross-references on each card, a tremendous amount of work. This Washington office that they worked out of had a handful of people, maybe 4 or 5. We couldn't even find in the first years whether they had a stenographer or whether
Oh,
Finch
geez.
was typing this stuff up himself, So
I'm mildly surprised they had typewriters actually at this point then.
yeah, most of this, well, there's also a lot of handwritten stuff, but most of this is typed. And of
Okay.
course, then you had, of course, the telegrams going back and forth, the
Oh, of
reports
course.
being filed. Finch was very bureaucratic, so it was very important to him that each agent files a daily report and sends it to the field office, which then sends it to the Washington office where it gets read, but it's also put on cards
Mhm.
and put into a catalog, cross-referenced. And So this is an interesting system, but again, they had 50 agents. That's not a big deal. Now Bilaski takes over in 1912.
Mm-hmm.
And when he takes over, like we said, the Mexican Revolution is exploding.
Mm-hmm.
By 1914, World War I is starting. This guy, 29 years old, he's organizing now this national intelligence gathering operation. It's not anymore just law enforcement. We're now talking about counterintelligence, and we're now talking about agents that are not just in New York, but they're also in Havana, Cuba. They're also in Mexico City. They're sending people all over, and they work for Bilaski. And so what I found fascinating is to really think about this man who's very young, and he's sitting there in Washington, D.C., and he's getting all this information. We said, 500,000-600,000 pages of stuff in the period that he was the chief. How do you manage that? And there's two things that I found. One is the man was brilliant. I mean, he was absolutely brilliant. I don't know if he ever slept. I mean, he literally, you see his notes and you see his comments all over the place. He absorbs what he gets in. He directs his agents. He prioritizes. And you can definitely say by the time, 1914, World War I starts, the BI has incredible successes. You think about being on top of things. They when the Germans were, trying to influence. There's this guy in New York City, Hans Tauscher. So he's trying to ship these weapons to India against to support the people there that were fighting against the British. The BI gets wind of that. They stop the ship. They arrest Tauscher.
Wow.
I mean, they are on top of things. And so this is, to me, if you look at Bilaski, he's probably one of the towering figures that has completely been ignored. History books about the FBI usually barely mention him. There's a historian, his name is Theo Harris. He's kind of like the Pope of FBI history.
Okay.
He's written many books about the FBI, and he has like a thesaurus of the FBI, basically just biographies of the different people. Bilaski is getting 3 sentences. 3 sentences, and one of the sentences is that he liked to do his gardening before breakfast. I'm not kidding. So here is this man who is basically building this BI from nothing to a towering counterintelligence agency. By the time the U.S. enters into World War I in 1917, even the U.S. military has to rely on the BI for its intelligence. And he gets no credit whatsoever. So I want to change that. That's definitely going to be a piece in the book, is to give this man his proper place in history. He was a brilliant manager. He had an incredible, he was not only staying in Washington, D.C. either. You would think that he's a bureaucrat or something like that. He got on the train. He came down here. He was in El Paso, for example, recruiting agents. And in fact, they arrested somebody here, and Bilaski was part of the arrest party. So he was he enjoyed that, I suppose. And so he, he's this personality that is active, that is actively managing, that has a good understanding of what's happening, and with these very, very few resources that they had available, he's the one fighting for his bureau and building it up in just 5 short years to a premier agency.
Because again, I get the perspective on this from the modern idea is that we've got all these 3-lettered agencies that are in charge of very specific aspects, different parts of it. FBI now being largely considered as, enforcement here with, some counterintelligence ideas, but that there being other intelligence agencies of the ones gathering data. I mean, there's almost more intelligence agencies that you can mention within a single program here, but it was all within this very nascent idea of having, federal control and resources on all of these things, all within one agency that was very much in this time having to spring up and respond to issues here. So we're going to have to get more into that here in the next segment, because speaking of some of those recruitments here, we have some more of the people that were actually being involved in this area that we're going to talk about here, but also, of course, have some people chiming in with us online that we do appreciate. Gail Crawford saying good morning from Grapevine, Texas. Barbara Givenbaney, of course, chiming in with us. Appreciate Raul Cazares over on the YouTube channel. Appreciate it. Mark Morales wishing us good morning. Flaca Jimenez and more tuning in, chiming in with us. Rose E. Rodriguez. And so we appreciate all of you tuning in. You can leave your comments over there, and we will take a call or two. If you're calling in during the middle of the segment, you might get put on hold briefly. Just wait until the break there. But otherwise, that number to call, if you want to, is 915-544-5876. 544 KTSM. We'll be back after this break with more on the El Paso History Radio Show, talking with Heribet von Feilitzsh about the history of the FBI and how the influence of this area and the conflicts in it during that time frame really changed it, and they changed it very much its trajectory. After this break here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant and Cantina serves the old Griggs Mexican food recipes in a new location at 6761 Donovan Drive. Enjoy great New Mexican food with cold beer and the one and only margarita from the cantina. The managers and cooks from the original Griggs restaurant serve tacos, combination plates, and sopapillas. Get the best Mexican food in the valley at Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant and Cantina, 6761 Donovan, near Loop 375. Call 877-2152.
Many retired El Paso area homeowners don't know where to begin when it comes to downsizing and selling their home. Patrick Tuttle and his Legacy Home team follow a proven process to help retired homeowners sell faster and for more money. Call Patrick Tuttle at 915-588-1850 today and get your home sold faster and for more money. That's Patrick Tuttle at 915-588-1850. Call him today.
Talk El Paso, weekdays at 4 on News Radio 690 KTSM, breaking down the impact of the news on the borderland and beyond. Brought to you in part by Mission Del Rey Southwest, souvenirs, gifts, and decor. That's Talk El Paso, Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m., right here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
It's $1,000 in your hand.
$1,000.
No NFTs or ESGs. It's $1,000 straight to you.
That is awesome.
Listen every hour from 9 through 5 weekdays for your chance to win.
$1,000 in your hand is brought to you by Approved Auto. Drive out in your new ride in less than an hour. Get payments as low as $159 a month. Worried about your credit? Don't sweat it. If you got your license and you got a job, they smell a deal. The deals are sweeter at Approved Auto, 8498 Alameda.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
And now, let's turn back the pages of time and return to the El Paso History Radio Show. Brought to you by Patrick Tuttle, Coldwell Banker Heritage Real Estate, 915-588-1850. Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant, 6761 Donovan Drive. By M1 EP Management Corporation, 915-592-4549. By Mission Del Rey Southwest, 1421 Lee Trevino, with El Paso souvenirs, decor, and gift shopping. Here again, El Paso History with Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for the El Paso History Radio Show. Got to tell you what we got coming up for you in future shows here to kind of put, not exactly a pin, but really kind of a crescendo at the end of this whole series that we've been doing really on the Mexican Revolution and involvement in the area. Next week, we're going to be talking with local military historian John Hamilton on the last Battle of Juarez during the Mexican Revolution and the direct military involvement from the U.S. into Mexico in that specific battle, including the shelling from El Paso into Mexico and the cavalry deployment that happened there. So tune in for that next week here in the program. Of course, I have one more sponsor to remind you about, Mission Del Rey Southwest. They're a great location, particularly if you're taking out-of-town people, but even just for your own decor, gifts, souvenirs, everything. If you've got a particular aesthetic in mind, it has anything to do with the Southwest, they've probably got something there for you, plus a great selection of local-based products here and stuff that really help you get, well, the flavor and the idea of the Southwest into your home or those of your guests, loved ones, etc. here. So, of course, they have great discounts on also a lot of items in their clearance area, among other things, but find all of this information by going to missiondelrey.com. And, of course, visit their 12,000 square foot showroom there on Lee Trevino. Of course, mention the El Paso History Radio Show for a discount. You can give them a call at 915-440 2140, or again, missiondelrey.com. Again, joined here in studio by Heribet von Feilitzsh, talking about the, Mexican revolutions here, but in a different way, about how that conflict and really the confluences happening in our area ended up influencing the creation and early history of the, Bureau of Investigation, as it was known, now known as the FBI more commonly. But I mean, it was not so much it was a very, again, relatively new concept, had not even been in place for a decade yet by the time it really had to start ramping up because of the demands of that conflict. And again, all of the intrigue, espionage, movement of material, persons, recruitment. I mean, everything came essentially right through this corridor and a lot of other sectors of the border here. So the demands on the early, again, BI agents were pretty great. And then agency had to respond in turn to really ramp up to it. So we had talked previously, the last time we had you on, actually talking about kind of one of those individual piecemeal efforts we had with Zach Lamar Cobb being a customs agent that had been, appointed in the wake of the victory of, again, we got the picture up here of Woodrow Wilson in that tumultuous election, and just kind of found himself in this position of kind of handling both intelligence, some of these demands, resources, and being involved in some of these issues. And so that's just kind of emblematic of the strange situations people in these kind of agencies could find themselves during this period of time here. So again, the BI trying to then ramp things up was having to essentially deal with that.
Yeah, and like you correctly said, with Cobb, he kind of fell into that situation because the envoy that Wilson sent to stay with Pancho Villa, Carruthers, couldn't communicate any other way, so he sent his stuff to Cobb, and Cobb sent it to Washington, and then the State Department hires him basically as an agent. And like you said, I mean, the intelligence gathering needs were so rapidly increasing. Just in 1916 we have the punitive expedition.
Right.
We don't have maps. They literally didn't know much. They had to hire scouts.
Wow.
to see where they can cross a river. And so, here the BI is just filling this need, and they're having to do it in such a rapid way that is just truly astonishing. That's why I'm so impressed with Bruce Bilaski, who is actually running this single-handedly. And it's beyond me how he did it, but there's no question that he was running the show there, and went from a time where you had to ask permission to get a 30-cent trolley ticket for an informant, all the way to having hundreds of agents, several hundreds, and really being the go-to agency in the U.S. government for counterintelligence. Let's just look at locally here, right? So I mentioned this guy H.A. Thompson. So he's we don't really know much
elusive,
about his background. Some of these guys came from detective agencies. And so Thompson also was earlier a Teal detective. So the Teal Agency, some listeners might know it from strike breaking, right? That was one of their main jobs. But since there was no real intelligence gathering capability in the government, before the Secret Service, there was the Pinkertons.
Right.
Yep, that was the Pinkerton Detective Agency. And so the government would just hire these detective agencies, Teal being one of them. Burns is another one. And, the guy that ran Burns became the BI director or chief in the 1920s before Hoover.
Right.
Yeah. So what you have is they are recruiting people from detective agencies or railroad detectives. So you have some of that.
Right.
And so you have a guy here in town. His name is Louis E. Ross. And he might not have been the best hire that they had, but he definitely was into the idea of creating more counterintelligence capabilities, being more active. He ran afoul of regulations, I would say. In the end, he actually participated in a robbery.
Oh, geez. Okay.
And ended up in prison. So that's the history of L.E. Ross. But he was the guy that got Sommerfeld involved and his people. So he, in 1912, Ross and Sommerfeld worked very closely together. And but you had some corruption there. For example, when they discovered a bunch of smuggled weapons, they put it in a warehouse, and then a few months later, some people made an inventory, and half of the weapons are gone.
evaporated.
Found legs and walked across the border. And yeah, so those were some issues. But Ellie Ross was actually quite an interesting agent, and before he dedicated his life to crime, was quite effective. Same thing with H.A. Thompson, the agent in charge in San Antonio. He joins the Mexican Secret Service in 1913, so he gets out of there.
So a lot of these kind of back and forth, and again, early and steps and maybe missteps and stumbling steps here, but again, the ramp up had to happen very rapidly. You mentioned going from a handful of agents in the area to then hundreds nationwide is not a simple thing here, but again, the demands in this area and across the entire border sector were very, very important here, because there were, laws and policies of the U.S. to be enforced, even if there were confusing dictates on that. So we'll have to get more into some of these individual stories here after this coming break here. We have to take that here for the bottom of the hour news break. But coming out of this, we'll talk more about some of these individual interesting characters involved in this, coming through the area and helping develop into the FBI as we know it today here. So we're going to be back after this break with more on the El Paso History Radio Show. Stay tuned.
M1 EP Management Corporation is proud to sponsor the El Paso History Show. If you're tired of the ups and downs of the stock market, invest in real estate. M1 EP manages apartments in El Paso and helps investors buy, hold, and sell property. See the website, m1ep.com. M1ep.com. To learn more about the many benefits and long-term appreciation of investing in real estate, call 915-592-4549. 915-592-4549.
El Paso History TV is now available for free on YouTube.com. Take a look at recent ABC7 news reports by Bernie Sargent on El Paso History TV about Waco tanks, the Franklin Mountains, Concordia Cemetery, and more. The YouTube channel also has more than 100 videos about El Paso history with lectures, documentaries, and various history clips. Go to youtube.com/El Paso History TV and find out how Texas history begins in El Paso.
This is Ivan Ochoa, General Manager from Sunland Park Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram Fiat. Thank you, El Paso and surrounding areas, for helping us be El Paso's #1 dealer in new Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram sales in March. As a gesture of our gratitude, we've extended all our Ram truck month deals, like 0 down, 0% interest for 72 months and no payments for 90 days.
Buy now and save thousands on a huge inventory of new and certified pre-owned vehicles. 2022 Ram trucks with 0 APR for 72 months. All new 2022 Jeep Wagoneer, full-size SUV with third row seating, 0 APR for 72 months, 0 payments for 90 days. We've partnered with even more aggressive lenders with great rates and terms, even if your credit is less than perfect. And we want your trade, even if you owe thousands more than it's worth. All military personnel and all first responders receive an additional discount. Thank you for your service. Sunland Park Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Fiat. Where buying a car is fun. At I-10 at Sunland Park Drive or online at sunlandparkdodge.com. Estamos en tu esquina El Paso Strong. Includes factory rebate and dealer discount plus TTNL. 0 APRs, $13.89 per thousand finance. Also like vehicles with approved credit. Offers not combined.
Your time has arrived to enroll in El Paso ISD Pre-K and Kinder. Our 3, 4, and 5-year-olds follow a STEAM curriculum that encourages creative problem solving and dual language classes that build cultural appreciation. And El Paso ISD is open enrollment, so all children in El Paso County can attend. Register your qualifying 3-year-old for half-day pre-K now, or your 4 and 5-year-old for free full-day pre-K or kinder at episd.org.
Spring fever means excitement, and at Casa Buick GMC, it's an exciting time for you to trade up for a great vehicle.
It's Casa Buick GMC's Spring Fever pre-owned sales event
This weekend.
Come take your pick from El Paso's giant selection of used cars, trucks, and SUVs.
We heat it up with the best financing options and lowest rates available.
2017 Kia Soul, $16,725. 2016 GMC Sierra SLT, $37,777. 2020 Buick Envision Preferred, $29,776.
It's an exciting time for you to trade up for a great vehicle this Friday and Saturday at Casa Buick GMC next to the airport, Montana at Airway.
News Radio 690 KTSM.
And now, let's turn back the pages of time and return to the El Paso History Radio Show. Brought to you by Patrick Tuttle, Coldwell Banker Heritage Real Estate. 915-588-1850. Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant, 6761 Donovan Drive. By M1 EP Management Corporation, 915-592-4549. By Mission Del Rey Southwest, 1421 Lee Trevino, with El Paso souvenirs, decor, and gift shopping. Here again, El Paso History with Andrew J. Polk.
This week, only in El Paso Inc. Be sure to check them out. You can find the stories, including on Horizon City, quickly growing and that could soon get too large sports park, the next phase of downtown revitalization being planned out in a local group's report, and 2 El Paso couples behind the latest establishments to open on the far west side, serving tiger milk tea, cactus salad, and entertainment. El Paso's business journal, El Paso Inc., is available for home or business delivery and online at elpasoinc.com. So find it there to order it, and we do appreciate their help as well in helping promote local El Paso history. Find our promos in there weekly as well. So again, joined here in studio by Heribet von Feilitzsh, Harry's to his friend, talking about some of the history of the BI, as it was known at the time, the Bureau of Investigation, a federal agency, make no mistake, but different currents going through at the time. I mean, real growing pains early on, because turning from a pretty sleepy agency and one that was a match to one that was having to deal with the concerns of the day. Again, as you were putting it, we had both the Mexican Revolution happening on the southern border, and there were some very large events going on with that people may be slightly more familiar with. The one that always comes to mind for me would be the Zimmerman note or the Zimmerman telegram, which for people who aren't familiar with this kind of a history may seem to have come out of nowhere. Like, what is, and that specific event was the sending of a telegram from essentially the German government to Mexico saying, hey, if you enter the war on our side and attack the United States, we'll make sure you get all of your land lost back in previous wars. And whether or not that was a ploy or not, but those currents, along with like the sinking of the Lusitania, directly leading to the U.S. involvement in World War I, among other things. So all of these currents and these essentially groundworks were being laid right in this area right before that time as well.
Exactly, yeah. And if you think about the Zimmerman telegram, here you have this confluence of World War I with the Mexican side of things here, the Mexican Revolution. And the Zimmerman telegram was really the last of the many efforts the Germans made to create a war or tension between Mexico and the United States. So, you'd mentioned the Lusitania. You have a submarine war going on. So American freighters are sunk. So you have factories blowing up here. In fact, in the summer of 1916, while Pershing is roaming through Mexico, the entire harbor in New York blows up because the Germans set that on fire, the ammunition dump for the French and English. So it was a wild time. And again, need for intelligence was just dramatic, and like you said, it was a nascent organization. It got its first chops at the Mexican border and became the premier intelligence agency when the U.S. actually entered the war. And so that's a dramatic development.
Absolutely. So we have some more stories of some of the specific individuals involved in the early history of it and right in our area here. So who's one we want to talk about? I think we got Harry Berliner.
Let's talk about Harry. I like Harry. This is probably the most colorful agent you can imagine. He's born in the 1870s. He is a businessman, so he actually had business in Mexico before the Mexican Revolution and in the beginning of the Mexican Revolution. He worked for Oliver Typewriter Company. And so the Mexican subsidiary that was based in Veracruz employed him. And as a result, Harry Berliner has been in Mexico City, in Veracruz, in Tampico, all over Mexico, spoke Spanish fluently. His parents had a German heritage, so he also spoke fluently German. And he operated for the BI under deep cover. And the reason why I say this is significant is think about the BI or the FBI being seen as a law enforcement agency. No, they had secret agents that were completely undercover. So little bit of history of Berliner. So he is in Mexico City at the Decena Tragica. And in fact, I have contemporaneous letters of his diary that I found his granddaughter, who was kind enough to let me see those. And so he describes what's happening. And he, undercover as this typewriter salesman, becomes the messenger for the American embassy. And reports on Huerta, also reports in one of his letters that Huerta had a damn nice typewriter. So he's right there as things are happening, as Madero is assassinated. Then he is in Cuba suddenly. And he sits at the main street at the promenade in a restaurant with Felix Diaz, who is one of the revolutionaries. Felix Diaz was Porfirio Diaz's nephew, and he plotted against Madero. He was also part of the plot, just like Reyes. And when the Decena Trágica happened, Huerta took over power but exiled him. So now he's in Cuba plotting to overthrow Huerta. And here is Harry Berliner sitting next to him in a restaurant as assassins are coming, trying to stab Diaz. In fact, they do wound him, but they didn't succeed because Harry tackled the attackers and got arrested, but was freed. It was celebrated as a hero in the United States for saving Felix Diaz's life. And so here, how in the world did he finagle himself into the inner circle of this revolutionary? Who would ever know? Incredible. Then he's in New York, and he's very well known for making his rounds and offering refreshments and cigars and getting information out of people. So how does he pay for that? We know, obviously, the BI has no funds for refreshments and cigars. I think I have the hunch that Oliver Typewriter Company paid for those because here and there he would sell a typewriter, and that maintained his cover. At one point, one of the conspirators for Huerta suspected that he was an agent. And so he called the Oliver Typewriter Company, and the company confirmed, no, he is one of our crack sales guys. So it was a very good cover. So he's in New York. Then he's sent to Columbus right after the Columbus attack. He comes to El Paso, then goes to Columbus, and his job was to interview local residents, Mexican residents. So he wanted to, the BI didn't have many resources. He spoke fluently Spanish, so that's why they sent it down here. And I can only imagine Harry Berliner with his cigar and top hat walking through the roads of Columbus, interviewing people. But a brilliant agent. Gets himself so deep undercover that people really don't know. I mean, take, for example, Sommerfeld. Sommerfeld is a spy master. I mean, this guy knows how to evaluate people. He becomes friends with Berliner. Berliner ingratiates himself to him. How he did it, who knows? But, all the way until 1918, when Sommerfeld gets arrested, Sommerfeld thinks that he's a typewriter salesman and a nice guy. Until Harry comes to his suite at the Astor Hotel and flashes his badge and says, "Come with me, Felix." He arrests him, and but not before he let Felix get dressed, take him to breakfast, have a nice, healthy breakfast, and then he took him down. So Harry Berliner is just an outstanding guy, and one of those crack agents that the BI had. There's another one, Luis Cantrell. We don't have a picture of him, but he also, Spanish speaker, is a secret agent for the BI in Havana, Cuba. Havana is full of conspiracies at that time. So those are, guys that are operating internationally for the BI. So now you can see how it's not just counterintelligence, it's also real intelligence gathering. And later in the punitive expedition, there are also BI agents and BI informants that are working for the Mexican railroads undercover, that are helping Pershing with information on where the Carranza troops are and so forth. So they're providing intelligence. So that, those are just some of the crack agents that they had. They also had a guy in New Orleans, also don't have a picture of him, but this guy's name is Charles Jones. And Charles Jones started out as a newspaper guy, becomes an informant for the BI, but told the BI, look, I'll give you information, but you leave my business alone, because in the meantime, he was engaged in arms trading. He was a broker for munitions and arms. And so obviously a conflict of interest, a sizable conflict of interest.
Just a little bit, yeah.
But what he does is ingratiates himself into another conspiracy of Felix Diaz. The Diaz people think that he is actually one of them. He copies all their papers and hands them right over to the BI. So they knew everything about this conspiracy to the last detail because Charles Jones, being their agent undercover, provided that. So again, operating as an intelligence agent, not as a law enforcement.
Just law enforcement here. And of course, there were, all of this stuff coming through this area. You mentioned going to Columbus here. There were some interesting characters in there as well, such as Gus Jones, right? Gus Buster Jones.
Yeah, you have to love him. So Gus Jones is one of the early hires. He's a lawman, was a sheriff. He also was a Texas Ranger. And so he becomes an agent in 1916. And he just knew the lay of the land here. He's been in this region for many, many years as a ranger and so forth. Had a slight alcohol problem.
Mm-hmm.
So he gave good information, but you had to get it in the morning.
Oh, jeez.
But yeah, Gus Buster Jones, incredible guy, a powerful guy. And like I said, shows how the BI is looking for different talents.
Right.
In this case, they needed somebody who was familiar with localities, familiar with smaller towns, Sanderson, Texas, and places like that became important in the Mexican Revolution now. And so that's where Jones, Gus Buster Jones was settled. Let's think about some of the more famous guys.
Mm-hmm.
Emil Costelitsky. I think we have a picture of him.
We got him right here. Yep.
So if you go to the FBI website, there's a short history of the FBI, and Emil Costelitsky is listed as the most famous agent that they ever hired.
Mm-hmm.
His background is that he was he's born in Russia, or what is now Ukraine, actually, but at that time was Russian Empire.
Right.
He comes through England to the United States and then Mexico, and signs up with the Mexican military, becomes a colonel in the Diaz military, and is basically based in Sonora. And so his biography is called The Eagle of Sonora. And so he fights against the revolution, supports Madero, but then when Madero gets overthrown, he has a battle in Nogales that he loses, and is chased into the United States. And so he settles, first he's in prison for violating neutrality laws, actually. And then he goes to Los Angeles and becomes a BI informant. And then later he becomes a full agent, special agent.
Wow.
Costelitsky, again, celebrated as the most famous guy that the BI hired. I find some difficulties with his reporting. I'll give you one example. There's a big investigation in this German guy. His name is Schwiertz, and he is supposed to try to smuggle airplanes into Mexico, and Costelitsky is on him, and lots of BI agents are put on this guy. From what I saw, a complete loser and big mouth. And so when we went behind the scenes and looked at the background of Schwiertz and a relationship with Costelitsky, it came out that Schwiertz had dated his daughter, and this didn't go well. Costelitsky broke it up and made sure that Schwiertz gets arrested. So here he's abusing basically his power as a BI agent or informant, and all these guys are chasing after this total loser that it basically amounted to nothing because there was a personal grudge. So Costelitsky is an interesting one. There's also one. His name is Guy Skull. And so these are some of those things that are surprising when you do research. So we're looking at documents, and there's this guy in the middle of nowhere in Sanderson, Texas, and his job for the BI was to go through freight bills and see if there's any suspicion that weapons and ammunition are in that freight. That's really a menial job, And so when Dr. Harris and I, when we looked through these papers, we kind of nodded at each other, go like, yeah, this must have been the loser of the department, because who would get a job like that? He's like months and months looking at waybills in Sanderson, Texas. Turns out the guy is a Rough Rider in the Spanish-American War, friends with Theodore Roosevelt, personal friends, and wrote a book about big game hunting that was a national bestseller. So thinking about having a famous guy on staff, the BI, I don't think they knew who they had there. and he would take vacation once in a while to do a book tour.
Yeah.
So Skull is one of those guys that you couldn't make this up if you tried, right?
Absolutely. So again, fascinating characters that came all the way, being Sanderson, and of course probably coming through here at certain points in time. I mean, all of them coming through and around this area, and again, some of the important intelligence gathering and dissemination, law enforcement, and also intelligence failures, because in the Columbus raid, we talked about previously that there was some reports out there that, hey, by the way, something might be happening, that were then ignored here. So the evolution continued on here, but we got to take that next break here. So coming out of this break, we'll close out kind of final thoughts here on some of these and some of the last characters we're talking about here. So stay tuned with more of the El Paso History Radio Show here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant and Cantina serves the old Griggs Mexican food recipes in a new location at 6761 Doniphan Drive. Enjoy great New Mexican food with cold beer and the one and only margarita from the cantina. The managers and cooks from the original Griggs restaurant serve tacos, combination plates, and sopapillas. Get the best Mexican food in the valley at Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant and Cantina, 6761 Doniphan, near Loop 375. Call 877-2152.
Many retired El Paso area homeowners don't know where to begin when it comes to downsizing and selling their home. Patrick Tuttle and his legacy home team follow a proven process to help retired homeowners sell faster and for more money. Call Patrick Tuttle at 915-588-1850 today and get your home sold faster and for more money. That's Patrick Tuttle at 915-588-1850. Call him today.
You're looking for real news. News Nation doesn't take sides or lean into political agendas. At News Nation, you get all sides. If you're looking for news without the noise, come back to the news with News Nation. News for all America. Go to newsnationnow.com/join us to find your television provider.
Talk El Paso weekdays at 4 on News Radio 690 KTSM, breaking down the impact of the news on the borderland and beyond. Brought to you in part by Mission Del Rey Southwest, souvenirs, gifts, and decor. That's Talk El Paso, Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m., right here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
Hi, guys. It's me, Brian Baumgartner. And maybe you've heard my podcast, The Office Deep Dive. Well, now I'm expanding it into even more of your favorite shows in my new podcast, Off the Beat.
Hey, everybody. I'm Rob Riggle.
Hi, I'm Allison Hannigan. My name is Jamie Lynn Sigler, meadow soprano.
I play Cameron Tucker.
Listen to Off the Beat on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
And now, let's turn back the pages of time and return to the El Paso History Radio Show. Brought to you by Patrick Tuttle, Coldwell Banker Heritage Real Estate, 915-588-1850. Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant, 6761 Doniphan Drive. By M1 EP Management Corporation, 915-592-4549. By Mission Del Rey Southwest, 1421 Lee Trevino, with El Paso souvenirs, decor, and gift shopping. Here again, El Paso History with Andrew J. Polk.
Welcome back here to the program. Going on towards the end of it here, still joined in studio by Heribet von Feilitzsh, and talking about, again, how some of the actions in and around the area and the characters that came through here and were positioned here even in the Mexican Revolution that led to the, well, essentially great expansion at the time of the Bureau investigation. It can draw a pretty straight line from that situation to the modern FBI. So there was one more guy you wanted to mention as just one of these interesting characters coming through this area and dealing with the issues here, Richard Levering, right?
Yeah, Richmond Levering. And
Richmond.
so we talked about famous guys, right? So we have this writer, Skull, friend with Roosevelt. And we have now this guy who's an oil tycoon. So he started, his dad had, I think, an asphalt company, and he built that out into refineries and stuff like that, gets involved in investments in Mexico. And he becomes first an informant, and then he becomes literally the right-hand man for Bilaski during World War I, because, again, the BI had to rapidly grow intelligence capabilities. And so Levering and some other guys started this organization called the American Protective League. So you could sign up with that if you're an American, and you can spy on your German American neighbor and give
Oh,
that
geez.
information. I'm not kidding you. So, so Levering organized that in New York. You can only imagine how important New York was for intelligence gathering.
Right.
And what's also interesting about Levering is very colorful guy. His wife was Barnum's daughter.
As in P.T. Barnum?
Yes,
Oh,
P.T.
wow.
Barnum, yeah. So in 1919, so as the war had ended, Bilaski is not happy with the changes that are happening to the BI, and he leaves in a huff. And where does he go? He goes to work for his friend Levering. And so this is where Bilaski ends up working for this company, huge company with interests all over South America and Mexico. And there's another thing where Bilaski is kidnapped in Mexico in 1923. That is while he's working for this company. Levering died in 1920, so just a year after Bilaski comes on. So Bilaski rises through the ranks, becomes vice president, and makes way more money than he would have ever made as a BI agent.
Fascinating. So again, all of this coming out of the Mexican Revolution, the influence being seen directly in this area, and of course across the entire border sector, all of this that led to a revolution in what, well, information gathering, intelligence, and law enforcement was on the federal level. And then it kind of fell off at the end. So let's bring it home with that. Kind of fell off at the end of the conflict here. You know, a good reason to be focused on these things kind of ended here. But then we saw then the further revamping of it by under the Hoover era, and then into the gangster era that all the movies focus on. And so again, kind of a straight line can be drawn from the initial efforts here, the restarting of the efforts under Hoover, and then straight into the modern FBI today.
Exactly. And Andrew, this is a really important point. That it is a straight line. You know, if you read histories about the FBI, you would think that there was nothing before Hoover came, you know, but it's actually not true. He had a nest that was made for him, and it was made by Bilaski.
Interesting stuff here. So that's the music here. So we're at the end of this program. Thank you again, Harry, for hanging out with us today to talk about these subjects. We'll see you out at Pepe's, right?
We'll be at Pepe's.
So we'll be at Pepe's. So join us there. Otherwise, be sure to tune in next week for more of the El Paso History Radio Show, 10 to noon, here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Have a great weekend, y'all.
Thank you for listening to the El Paso History Radio Show. We hope you'll join us again next Saturday morning, 10 to noon. And be sure to tell a friend about us. Brought to you by Patrick Tuttle, Coldwell Banker Heritage Real Estate, 915-588-1850. By Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant, home of the Juan and Only Margarita. By M1 EP Management Corporation. By Mission Del Rey Southwest, 1421 Lee Trevino, with El Paso souvenirs, decor, and gift shopping. Thank you for joining us from the